Pixel Therapy is a member of the But Why Though podcast network.
Go to butwhythoughpodcast.com for an inclusive geek community offering pop culture news, reviews, and podcasts.
I mean, we just see so much hate in the gaming community all of the time. So to make a space that is just radically kind is somewhat unique, especially when you have all of these people who are out here just, they just wake up in the morning and they choose hate. I'm sorry that that's what you choose, when instead you could choose kindness.
Welcome to Pixel Therapy, the video game podcast where we look at the games we play through the lens of the player, where what you play is just as important as how you play it, and where emotional intelligence is a critical stat. Every other week, we bring on a guest who may or may not consider themselves a gamer to discuss the games that have made them and changed them, and all the feelings they have about our favorite pastime. I'm your co-host, Jamie, pronouns she, her.
And I'm your co-host, Spencer, pronouns they, them.
And this is Pixel Therapy. We've got some news and noteworthies for you this week.
Of the news and noteworthies.
Buckle up, as they say. We're going to start with our Patreon monthly shoutouts. This is our special thank you to the folks who subscribed at the name in the credits tier or above over on patreon.com/pixeltherapypod for the month of March. Those fine folks are Yinka, Val, and Jane. Big thank you to those three for continuing to hold down the fort and subscribing on that month-to-month basis. We really appreciate you so much. If you want to get your name in the credits like Yinka, Val, and Jane, you can head over to patreon.com/pixeltherapypod and check out our plethora of perks that start at just $2 a month. And it'll net you a monthly bonus episode, which at this point, you've got like 5 whole bonus episodes banked in there. You pay $2. You got 5 whole episodes.
That's series.
Exactly. That's just like prime Spencer and Jamie content, with discussion topics such as our favorite games of all time, games we're drawn to during the holidays, our New Year's gaming resolutions, video game crushes. And most recently, in March, we did a fantasy video game draft for 2021, making our picks for the games we think are coming out this year and are going to review best. And I actually have a little update on our Fantasy Critic League because there's been some shakeups and there's been some points that have been earned by both of us. So if you want to follow along with what Spencer and I are doing here, you can go to fantasycritic.games, make an account, and search for Pixel Therapy Pod, which is our league. And you can keep track of the score or start a league of your own if you're interested in doing this. But so when we first drafted, I had picked Gotham Knights by WB Montreal. And literally like 4 days after I drafted it, they announced that the game was not going to come in 2021.
It'd be like that.
It does be like that sometimes. So I had to drop that. And I decided to pick up Monster Hunter Rise, which is a Switch game, came out a couple weeks ago. And so I have that game on the board with some points, and you, Spencer, actually have 2 games on the board with some points. Soulstorm came out. So Spencer, you have points for both It Takes Two and Oddworld Soulstorm. Now, hilariously enough, It Takes Two and Monster Hunter Rise, I think both came out on the same day and were scored on the critics. The critics gave them 88.
That's so us.
For both of them. And so we tied at 18 points there. But then because you have Oddworld Soulstorm out as well, that unfortunately only netted you 2 points, currently sitting at a 74 on Open Critic. So you are in the lead by a meager 2 points. It's 20 to 18. We also just learned that what I thought was going to be my next game coming up, Deathloop, just got delayed but only to September. So still,
Deathloop looks really cool. It's kind of like 60s vibes. Is that 70s?
60s, 70s. I don't know. I could never pinpoint what it's retro, I think is what you would call it.
Yeah.
Reminds me of a VHS tape.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the current score is Nobody Likes Us Inc. 18 points, Meow Meow Beans.
Meow Meow Beans.
20 points. So you do have a leg up right now. We'll keep y'all
Incorporated. Thank you.
I don't think it says that in the thing, so I'm just reading what I have here in front of me. Just working off the information that I have. All right. So if you want to hear the original draft of us and our silly shenanigans as we picked our fantasy games, just pop over to patreon.com/pixeltherapypod and sign up at that $2 a month. And if you're not interested in doing that, no worries at all. There are lots of other ways to support the show. And a big one is rating and reviewing us on your podcast platforms, specifically right now on podchaser.com for the month of April. They are running their annual Reviews for Good campaign, where every review left on the site earns a 25-cent donation towards Meals on Wheels America's Go Further campaign, which supports the more than 5,000 community-based programs across the country that are dedicated to addressing senior isolation and hunger. The Meals on Wheels network serves virtually every community in America, and along with more than 2 million staff and volunteers, 2 million, delivers the nutritious meals, friendly visits, and safety checks that enable America's seniors to live nourished lives with independence and dignity. During the COVID-19 pandemic, they've been working to expand their reach with a goal to add 19 million meals and 1 million seniors to the program. So that's what the Go Further campaign is all about specifically. You go over to podchaser.com, leave Pixel Therapy and maybe your other favorite podcasts a review, and you'll be helping us and chipping in on this important program at the same time. So check that out if you have a moment.
Mm-hmm. The only time you'll get paid to leave podcast reviews.
Well, you won't get paid, but somebody will.
Yeah.
All right. Those are all the updates I got for you this week. It is time to get cozy. It's time to pull up an armchair. Feel free to lie down on your couch. We're going to talk about our feelings. Spencer, how are you doing today?
Well, Jamie, if it sounds like my voice is coming to you through a ghostly echo chamber, that's because it kind of is. I am sitting in, this feels weird to say, but my partner and I bought a house? And I guess I wanted to mention it to everyone just because the story of how we got here is just kind of funny because you also bought a house.
I did also buy a house. We bought houses. Not the same house, different houses.
No, unfortunately, not the same house. Tragically, some might say.
Yeah.
I tried to get one on Jamie Street, but it just wasn't happening. But, yeah, I'm sitting in it's empty right now because turns out buying a house is expensive. Just kidding. There's just we got stuff to get over and live in an apartment still. So it's empty, but we like to come and spend time with the house and just make sure it's still there. And so I'm coming at you live. With my co-host, Birds, that you might hear. A lot of chatty Cathy's out here in the countryside. I'm trying to podcast, do you mind? But they don't seem to care about my knees. But yeah, this is very fun. But essentially, it's just kind of crazy because a couple years ago, Jamie and I live in Boston, Massachusetts, in the U.S., and Jamie one day was basically like, so I was thinking about taking this first-time homebuyers class. It's free, and it's a couple hours for a couple weekends, and it's just to learn about what it takes to buy a house. And I just was like, I'm coming with you. I don't know what it was. We went, we had a great time. And then 2 years later, I don't know, you bought a house too, so it's just kind of crazy because we both ended up closing the same week, and it's just very us, a series of events. But really, I don't know. I think I'm still kind of blown away. Just in general, I think Americans aren't really educated on how to buy a house or how to do things that would help you survive in a capitalist society in terms of building equity and stability and stuff like that. And so the organization that we learned our home buying class from, called MAHA, based MAHA, based in MA, if anyone, based in Massachusetts, if anyone's interested in looking them up. But they really just empowered us to think, just outside of, not necessarily having to be in downtown Boston. It's not the only place you can buy houses. I think they really opened my mind to, not that I ever Like I think I've always wanted to live in a more rural area when I eventually settled down, but just sort of thinking outside of the limitations of how impossible it feels to afford anything in a city. Like there's so many other options, and there's aid available, and there's special types of mortgages and loans that you can get where it's not like you need 20% in cash right now, which is so unattainable for so many people. And so I think just for my partner and I as a queer and trans couple, and also as people who don't have like generational wealth to fall back on, it's just been really amazing to have this happen. And I think, I mean, if you hadn't said that to me 2 years ago, I don't think I'd be here right now. And also just in general, like, I don't know, it's just, life is crazy. It's exciting. I feel very lucky, and I'm also just excited to be building equity as a quote unquote marginalized person.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. It's cool. I'm glad we were able to do the class together. Obviously my partner came too, and it was nice to like know someone else in the class and be able to bounce stuff off of like what we were learning. And even having been in the class though, like going through the home buying process was still just such a fucking whirlwind. And we were constantly like feeling sick to our stomachs and Googling and trying to figure out how things were supposed to work. And I mean, I just like, I feel like you experienced this too, but so much of it came down to like just having to trust our realtor and like what in our case he was telling us. And I don't know,
it's
like
scary.
if he had wanted to screw us over, I feel like he could have very easily, because you don't know what you don't know, and these systems are not set up to be accessible to folks who don't like swim in those waters on a regular basis. And so it is a really scary process, but you can do it, and there are resources out there.
Even just having each other too to that, like when the anxiety, it's such a big shift. It's like, it's hard to even articulate how much has changed. It feels like almost like what I imagine having a child feels like. Like it's just a big life change that affects you in ways you don't even anticipate. And I feel like I've gone through the range of emotions. Like even though I'm happy, there's been moments of fear and regret and bargaining and like all of these things that have this waves of emotion. And I feel like if I didn't have you around to be like, I feel crazy right now, did I make a terrible mistake? And you being like, oh my God, I know exactly what you're talking about. Don't worry. Like that helps too. So I guess if anyone has home buying questions, just email us, pixeltherapypod@gmail.com. This is a video game podcast. Thank you.
We'll become tips for your first home buying experience. I will say though that like going through the home buying process, I now feel like I can tell I feel like I'm an expert, even though I did it one time. Like I don't actually feel like I'm an expert, but like I know other people who are looking at houses, and I'm just like, oh, here's how that works, as though my one experience like would carry over. So I'm just like, oh, I'm just a know-it-all asshole. But also the one thing that we had in common that I've heard other people say too that I think is really important to put out there is literally the night that we closed on our house, right? Or not closed, sorry. The night that our offer got accepted. And it was like, okay, we actually had to offer on multiple houses because the housing market in Massachusetts right now is a little bit woohoo. And people are, I think actually at this point, it's gotten to the point where it's really, really difficult to get anything because people are just making offers without even seeing the houses. But very competitive, very competitive market right now. We finally got an offer accepted. And the first thing I felt was complete and total existential dread. Like, and complete like regret and complete like we've bought. And literally up until the day of closing, like literally we came and saw the house the morning of closing. I was like, did we get a good house? Is this too small? Is the backyard not big enough? Like, is this not going to work? Is our shit not going to fit in here? What are we going to do with this space? Why does this look like this? Why is there a dent in the wall? Why does all this need repainted? I didn't know that this is what this looked like. Why didn't the previous owners clean? This isn't broom clean. We're going to have to hire somebody to clean. As I like just sit on the floor in the smallest bedroom and like try not to cry because I just signed the next like 30 years of my life away. Mood. So I think that's all very real, and I think it's part of the process, and I think it's okay to be scared. And also now, a week and a few days later, I'm feeling much different about it. Like, we've gone through the gamut, and I feel like you're probably in a similar place. You guys bought a, very different house. You're moving on a different trajectory, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's a big, stressful life event, and it's okay to feel all of the emotions about it.
Exactly. So yeah, it's been lots of change, lots of good change, lots of processing. I'm excited to. So I guess I just want to say thanks y'all for letting us take a few minutes to talk about this. I know it's not super video game related, but it's been very consuming the past few weeks. So I definitely have dialed back a bit on my game time, not by choice, but because of circumstance.
It's never by choice.
I do feel though that I've been looking for comfort and familiarity because so much of my life is shifting and changing. So something I've been getting really into lately is playing Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley is like a farming simulation game that was created by one person, developer Concerned Ape, over like 7-8 years. It's a game that was really heavily inspired by games like Harvest Moon, and I guess specifically Harvest Moon, and Miyazaki films. He was really inspired by the kind of aesthetic of, the dust sprites and the kind of nature and the mysteries and magic of like being among nature and caring for animals and being in touch with, the pastoral environments. I say as I sit in this house surrounded by the very same. I'm in a very Stardew Valley vibe right now.
Yeah.
My new town is very small. It doesn't have a local government. It just has a town board. And in the middle of the town square, there's a bulletin board where folks all over the community can post things for stuff they might need or stuff they're looking for. It's all very charming.
So you literally moved to Stardew Valley.
Yeah. Literally. And we're starting from the ground. We have 2 acres that is completely just open to us to do whatever we want. So I guess we can figure that out. I'm planning it all out in Stardew Valley first.
Yeah. Let me just tell you, a pumpkin does not sell for like $400 in real life. For just FYI,
13 days.
Oh my god, it's so easy to be a millionaire farmer in Stardew Valley, and it's just that is not real life at all. But I wish.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just I don't know. It's there's something about that game that it has charmed so many people. I think too, the new Story of Seasons game came out, which is the latest title from the original folks, the Japanese team that made Harvest Moon. And as I was playing it, I think what's interesting about the new Story of Seasons Pioneers of Olive Town game is that it too is very inspired by Stardew Valley and how Stardew Valley picked up things of Harvest Moon and optimized them and updated them. It feels like that team has then been re-inspired by that to create the game that they've made now with Olive Town. But I found that it made me nostalgic for Stardew, and so I picked it back up. It's highly recommend for folks who are looking for what some might call a cozy game or something lightweight and easy to jump in and out of. I've been playing it on the Nintendo Switch, like handheld, which is different from how I played it originally in 2017. I played it on the PS4. I've got to say, there's been a lot of updates to Stardew Valley since then, like more missions, more crops, more events. Like it's almost like a updated game. Like it's there's a lot about it that like you can tell that they're still caring about serving the people who continue to play the game and making improvements, which is nice to see. But playing it handheld has really brought a new level of intimacy to it. Like I found that I've really enjoyed buying games that are becoming available on Switch that I used to play on Steam or on console again, just because I don't know. I've gotten so used to the distance of playing with a console and a television, and there's something like I can curl up with my Nintendo Switch. I can take it outside. I can, get in bed and cozy up. Like there's just a lot of flexibility to how I'm playing, and because it's so close to my chest, so close to my heart, I don't know. There's something about it that feels really comfy, and so I've really been enjoying that. And I guess the nice thing about me playing Stardew Valley is that my partner is able to claim the PS5, and so
my, how the turns of table.
The turns are certainly tabled. Yeah, but I'll keep this quick. I just wanted to mention that I have been doing some Theyfriend reviewing of Red Dead Online. So Red Dead Online, okay, so Red Dead Redemption 2 is like a really popular game. It's like, you know, this cowboy Arthur, and it's like this beautiful, tragic story. And then Red Dead Online it's an online multiplayer game developed and published by Rockstar Games as the online component of Red Dead Redemption 2. It came out in May 2019. For a PS4 and Xbox One, and then it's also available on PC and Stadia as of November 2019. But it's basically like you are experiencing life on the open frontier of this map that's based on basically early 1900s America, like right when it was on the cusp of the Industrial Revolution. I'm just gonna Google Industrial Revolution to make sure I got that right, so that someone doesn't tweet at me that I'm a bad person. Okay. Ooh, I'm wrong. So the Industrial Revolution was the period from about 1760 to 1840. So somewhere in there.
Only about 150 years off. That's okay. Hey, I was right here. I was nodding along. I was like, you got it.
You're with me.
You got it.
With me.
I don't understand how years work, and I don't know history. So
yeah. So whatever. We're gamers, not historians. Anyway, so Red Dead Online, it's really fun because it's just this very open world where you can be a hunter and hunt animals. You can be a collector and look for treasures. You can be a naturalist and study plants and not kill animals, but just knock them out, collect samples to kind of fill your journals. Like, it's a very immersive game for people who want the experience of really living in the world of Red Dead. And I think one of the things that people really love about the Red Dead Redemption series is that it's so grounded in realism. Like, it's a game where time passes, where you have to make sure to feed yourself and take care of your horse and feed and care for your horse. You can get sick. There's, you have to cook, and it's really known for that immersive quality. And I think it too, something that strikes me about Red Dead is that even you as the protagonist, I think in a lot of games that are still supposed to be quote unquote realism, there's still a bit of like super poweredness to your character. Like, you can jump unnatural heights, or you can survive, incredible amounts of violence unscathed. And in Red Dead, it's like, if you get shot, like, you're kind of fucked, and you can't just catapult yourself over these jumps. Like, you are basically limited to kind of what a human body is capable of doing. And so that kind of it really grounds the player, and I can understand why people love living in this world. Like, it's super detailed. I think the flip side of that is because it's such a world that is so rooted in its immersive, realistic qualities, it makes it more disturbing for me, because the game can be very Westworld-esque. And by Westworld-esque, Westworld is a HBO TV show about a simulation where people can basically live out living in an Old West world. But essentially, it's basically just a place for people to act out the fucked up desires and urges that they have in real life but can't do because of the rules of polite society. And like, the way Aaron plays Red Dead, which I really respect, I think one of the reasons I avoid online games is that I get very caught up in like being polite and doing what other people are doing and having friends. And Aaron is very much in it to like be alone and have his relaxation time. Like he'll be like collecting plants. So Aaron's my partner, and he's the one who's been playing. I've been watching him, and like he'll you'll see other players from time to time. And there was this time where you can emote, so you can hat tip to someone, or you can wave. And so Aaron waved to someone waved back, and then the guy started following Aaron and inviting him to be in his posse, and Aaron was just like, no. Stop following me. Or like he'll help someone, like someone's horse died and he gave medicine to the horse, and like he likes to help people, but I don't know. I was really struck by the healthy boundaries he set around his play. Like I was like, wow, you can say no to invites and it doesn't make you a bad person. Like I just really respect that. But at the same time, it's like, he'll be leaning down to gather plants, and all of a sudden you look to your right and you see a player's horse riding by with someone tied to the back of the horse that they're dragging along the ground, which is something that you can do to other people. I've also read online, reports from women who play Red Dead Online, and they talk about how they absolutely have to design their character to look like a really buff white man, because if certain groups, there are these groups called posses, like you can form groups with other players, and you can so part of the Red Dead system is there's a morality bar. Like you can either be a bad person or you can be a good person. Things like caring for your horse and helping people raise your goodness points. Things like killing random people or robbing folks and stuff lowers your honor. And so he'll see things like, things I've read from women online is that if they don't make themselves look like the super buff white man, what will happen is that posses will surround them. You can do this thing where you can tie someone up and put them on the back of your horse. And I've seen stories from women talking about how groups of men, and also trigger warning if people want to skip ahead like 15 to 30 seconds, I'm just going to mention like just description of violence, but essentially they'll threaten assault, tie them up, put them on a horse, drag them around, beat them up, kill them. But basically the act of not just, like I think in a game that's like a shooter, like when I'm thinking of like the Overwatches of the world, someone just shooting you is a pretty common thing to happen, like dying suddenly. But it's the extended torture of tying someone up, putting them on your horse, riding around while you describe all of the terrible things you want to do to them in real life, and then killing them is a really horrifying thing. And I've seen it happen to Aaron, like because he's a peaceful player, for the most part, the more peaceful you are, the less you're able to be seen by other people on the map to kind of protect you from encounters you don't want to have. But there have been times that posses have found Aaron, and when a bunch of people are overpowering you in Red Dead, there's really nothing you can do other than watch yourself get tied up and dragged around by a bunch of assholes. So it's just, I don't know, it's been fascinating to watch, because I think the fact that this world is not so far removed from our real world makes the violence that I see in the game more disturbing than it would be in a game where violence is the expectation. And I know that Red Dead is a rough and tumble world that is, supposed to emulate the dying out of the cowboys and the last frontiersmen, and maybe people, want to do robberies and have fun shootouts and stuff like that. But this kind of violence that I'm talking, this targeted violence is something much more sinister. And so it's just been really fascinating, because I've never really seen a game like this before.
Yeah. And it's so much more disturbing because of the way the game is inviting people into the space to just exist the way they want to exist, and that this is it's not a quest. It's not It's not tied to anything that gets those folks who are doing that anything in the game except for like their own pleasure at being sadistic fucks.
Yeah.
And that even though they're not doing it to a living person in like real life, you're still doing that to another player who's sitting on the other end of that controller, on the other end of that screen, and having to watch this. That's really fucked up. That's really fucked up.
Yeah, and it's very, the reason I say it's very Westworld is because Westworld could be a very scary, violent show. And I don't know, it makes you think about, is there any kind of simulated peaceful world that we can make that people won't fuck up? I don't know. Yeah. Ooh. But, spooky. Anyway, Red Dead Online seems like a great time.
Jesus Christ. I do like that if you're that's a cool system that they've added, that if you're generally peaceful, you're kind of hidden from folks who are running around doing more violent actions. But Yeah, when I hear stuff like this, I just wonder, like, how does Rockstar, the developers of this game, how could they create systems to prevent this kind of, like, they must know that this is happening, right? So either they don't care or they do care and they just haven't found a way to prevent this.
Right.
Or they think that it's part of the game and that should be left in to let people do stuff like that.
Right, like I feel like this is exactly one of those situations where someone talks about, hey, it's kind of traumatic as a woman for someone to threaten me for extended periods and I can't do anything about it and besides wait for it to stop. And someone being like, well, it's a game. It's just a game. That's what you're supposed to do. It's about, being rowdy and doing like, yeah, I can see that just like this idea that because the violence is a fantasy that its implications don't exist outside of the screen is
just,
like
I don't
harmful.
believe that though.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I just wonder how many people at Rockstar can empathize with the experience of being someone that happens to. Like I just don't know if they understand. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. What you're describing feels very far removed from the way violence manifests in a lot of online games where it's a competitive shooter and everyone has like signed up to have this experience and killing is just like part of the way that you score points. And the focus isn't on the violence. It's on the competition. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you kill someone and, you mentioned Overwatch or Call of Duty, because that's part of the mission. That's what everyone's doing. And you immediately respawn and that's what you signed up to do. And there isn't this prolonged, like there's consent involved, right? Like you both agreed to come into this game and have this experience with each other. And that's the way you're going to act versus what's happening in Red Dead, which is people are not consenting to have this experience. Or I guess you could say that like, well, they turned the game on, but with there being such a breadth of what you can have in this game, if that's like the other side of the coin that you have to accept to play it, like that's enough to make me not interested in jumping in.
They have this feature called defensive mode that you can turn on where I believe when it's on, it's like you're effectively invisible to anyone who's in offensive mode, which is like that you're discoverable for fights and things like that. But what seems to happen is that if you're in defensive mode and you fire a shot or you take out a weapon or whatever, it automatically switches you to offensive mode. But sometimes if you're in defensive mode and you are still getting attacked, the only option you have is to defend yourself. So why should that open you up to more? Like, I think if anything, they need to improve the usability of their defensive mode and maybe make it a bit more robust in terms of settings. Because right now it just seems to sort of arbitrarily flip on and off and you don't always know when you've been switched back into offensive mode, which just opens you up to more bullshit. But at the same time, people who want to engage in the outlaw stuff or like the missions involving shootouts and stuff should be able to do that without being virtually sexually assaulted. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. So I don't know what the solution is because it's a game that I think one of the beauty of it is the freedom you have to truly live in this world and be whatever you want to be. But the flip side of that is like, where's the line of, I mean, of course, sexual assault is way over the line, but it's like, how do we maintain that feeling of freedom while mitigating the bigotry and the hatred that comes out of that?
Yeah.
So where are the queer trans posses?
There you go.
Let us make naturalist posses where everyone, like, I think if we could form communities like you can in ARC Survival Evolved, where you can make all sorts of groups, like, I think maybe that could be a key to it. Like, let us make communities that are centered around other things besides the violence part, or make it easier to find posses who are into the same kinds of activities that you're in. Just maybe that's part of it. Yeah. Anyway. So Red Dead Online, check it out. Be careful. What are you playing?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as we were saying, like, we just moved, or I just moved. We both just got houses. There's been a lot going on personally. Work has been very busy too for me. So my gaming has also taken a little bit of a dip, and I just haven't had brain capacity for anything too deep or intense. So kind of in that same vein. So I've been hopping around and trying a lot of, like, I've played a little of a lot in the last few weeks. But something that I kind of wanted to focus on today is that I wanted to talk a bit about Xbox. I think that, we mostly talk about PlayStation and Nintendo on this podcast. And that's because I'm a total Sony pony. And
that's one of the gayest phrases I've ever heard you say, and I love it so much. I hope you never stop saying it.
That's what people call people who are like Sony fanboys. And I don't know if I count as a fanboy, so I'll say I'm a Sony pony.
I want to be a Sony pony. You
can be a Sony pony. We'll all be Sony ponies. We'll gallop into the sunset together. Yeah. Anyway, I'm a big Sony fan. I've had PlayStations my whole life. That's where I've done most of my gaming. But Xbox, I've always kept a keen eye. It's just a lot of the games that they are most well known for tend to be shooters. Halo and Gears, I think, being their two biggest franchises. That's Halo and Gears of War, which are both shooter games, military shooter games. And that's just never really appealed to me. And so I've tended to go more towards what PlayStation has on offer and the first party games that they have. But I want to talk about Xbox because I decided to pick up an Xbox Series S, which is when the new consoles launched last fall, Xbox came out with the Xbox Series X and the Xbox Series S. And the X is 4K, graphics that'll make your eyeballs bleed. Nice. And it's like a $500 console. That was their competitor for the PS5. I was like, I'm not buying two $500 consoles. I'm going to get the PS5. I'll be all set. No worries. But the Series S kept calling my name. It's this cute little white box. Cute little white box. It's only $300. No, only. It was $300, which is on par with the Switch. Cheaper than the other big guys.
Yeah.
And Xbox has this thing called Game Pass, which is essentially a subscription service for games. It's like Netflix for games. You pay, depending on what type of service you want, anywhere from, I think it's $10 to $15 a month. And you get access to a library of games that you can download and play without any additional charges, aside from your monthly fee. So I'd been kind of interested in this and the library of games that would open up. They're also putting a ton of independent games on Game Pass.
So cool.
And I was very intrigued by it. Well, in just these last few weeks, they've been making some really cool announcements that are very exciting. And I'm very quickly watching my Xbox become my indie game machine, which is such a weird shift from what I ever would have expected for Xbox. But
yeah.
So on March 26th, they had what they called the ID at Xbox showcase. I believe ID stands for independent development. I mean, that makes sense, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't seen it spelled out anywhere. So ID at Xbox program. It's their program that they do to support independent game development. They had this 3-hour long showcase, which I did not watch all of because, my goodness, that's a very long showcase. That was just indie games. There was not a single AAA big deal game in there. They showed updates and new trailers for over 80 independently developed games in the showcase. And of those 80, 23 of the games that they showed were confirmed to be coming to Xbox Game Pass at launch. So that's games that when they come to console, they are going to be part of Xbox. If you have Xbox Game Pass, you're going to be able to download and play those games for no additional cost.
How much would they be, not on Game Pass, $40, $50?
Not on, I mean, it really depends. Independent games kind of run the gamut. So
true.
Could be anywhere from $10, $15 to, I think usually most smaller games you see kind of top out around $30, $40. But definitely, some of them can go higher. Some of them can be the $60, $70 range. So... But for someone like me who wants to play a shitload of these games, what I've ended up doing on my PlayStation, and we've talked about my horrible backlog, I get these, games $10, $15 a pop. That shit adds up versus a $15 monthly subscription where you have access to basically everything you want to play for the year. It does make a big difference financially.
Yeah.
But of those 23 games that they announced that are coming first to Xbox Game Pass, for one thing, I was super fucking excited because 3 of the games are ones that we are already on our radar and that we're really excited for. That's Backbone, which is made by our friend Alex, who guested on episode 15 from Eggnut. Boyfriend Dungeon, which we talked about in the episode where we did our fantasy draft on the Patreon, and She Dreams Elsewhere, which is another one that we've talked about both normally and in the fantasy draft. So 3 indie games that I was already really excited for, and then like I probably added another dozen or so like games to my must play list for this year that are coming straight to Game Pass, and it's so fucking cool because the game that I've been playing the most, I actually just beat last night, is called Narita Boy, which is one of these indie games that they showed at the showcase and that launched. It's by Studio Koba. Came out March 30th, straight to Game Pass. I think it's like $20 or $30 on PlayStation, but I was able to get it for no additional charge through Game Pass. I probably wouldn't have picked it up right now if I was only playing on PlayStation, or maybe ever. But I watched a trailer and the music was so cool. It's got this great soundtrack by an artist called Salvinsky. The studio itself was like 10 people when the credits rolled. It was just like 10 people, like names came across. Wow. And I probably wouldn't have played this game if it wasn't for Game Pass, but I spent the week playing this game and it's such a good game. It's such a great little game. It wasn't like, it didn't change my life, but it's this side-scrolling Metroidvania. You play as Narita Boy, who is a samurai warrior wielding the techno sword, which is made up of the 3 colors of the trichroma, red, yellow, and blue. It's got a 80s retro futuristic vibe where it's like video games, but like the way we imagine futuristic video games in the 80s. It's like kind of
Runner vibes.
Blade Runner, Tron. It definitely gives me some Tron vibes. But Narita Boy gets pulled into the video game world. And he's a hero of the Trichroma Kingdom, I think they're called. And so you go to the 3 different houses of the colors of the yellow, the blue, and the red, and you have to liberate them from this villain who's spawned from the red beam named Him. And him and his minions called the Stallions are taking over the code. They're taking over the code in the Trichroma Kingdom.
Sounds like a dungeon party I've been to.
Yeah. So it's, it's just this fun action game. It was challenging, but it does that thing where that's like my favorite thing about games that have challenging combat is if you die and they just respawn you right there. Like, I never felt like I was losing progress. A battle might take me several tries and like the enemy's health bar goes back up, but I'm not having to like retraverse some whole long area to get back to the fight to then die. It was always just like, okay, here you go. And pretty much all of the fights, like all of the combat scenarios, it has a save right after. So it's like, if you go through one panel and you get your ass beat, you're just going to have to do that panel again. You're not going to have to do the 4 panels before that.
Love that.
So very low frustration, but still like fun and challenging combat, trying to master it. The like meta narrative of the game is like within all these trichroma people, some of them are very religious. Some of them study the code. There's like priests who pray to the ancient algorithms. It's all like I kind of got a little lost in the narrative, but like the aesthetic of it overall was very cool. And they're like God in this world is the creator, the person who like originally made the game. And you're actually going through and trying to reinstate his memories so that he will rise up and destroy him once and for all. So you're unlocking the creator's memories and getting these really cool segments where you just kind of walk through this gray, like sort of grayish black and white world where you're watching these important moments from the memories of the person who made the game. Not the person who made Narita Boy, but the person who made like the game within the game world. And you basically realize that he'd had some trauma in his life and that him is a manifestation of like all of his dark and like his sadness and his anger and his grief. And so him has risen up out of that. And has taken over the world, and Narita Boy is actually his son, and you have to remind him that Narita Boy is his son and that he needs to overcome him in order to be there for his son. And that's like, yeah. So it ended up having like a pretty heartwarming story. I won't spoil the actual ending, but the actual ending was very fucked up. And it looks like they're setting up a sequel. So that's cool. But yeah,
very
it was just
fucked up. I'm scared.
Do you want me to? I can. Okay, I won't spoil it then. Yeah, I don't know. It was a great time. It was like less than 10 hours, and I would have never picked this game up if it wasn't for Game Pass. It was just so easy. I just saw it there. I watched the trailer. I was like, I like the songs. I was like, this kind of game, like a Metroidvania action platformer game, not usually something that I'm going to go for. Mm-hmm. But because it was on Game Pass, I was like, I'll just try it. If I don't like it, I'm not out anything, right? I can just uninstall it. And then I ended up playing the whole game and really, really digging it. So I just think like what they're doing with this is it's very cool anyway. And I think it's also super fucking cool for these indie devs because they're getting paid to be on Game Pass. Like Xbox is paying them to do this. Yeah. They're getting some financial security through that process. Like I've never seen one of the contracts, but I think it's generally assumed that like they sign a contract with Xbox to come to Game Pass and they're getting a lump sum of money. Some developers have come out and said that like basically those kind of deals are what just like gets them in the black. Like it's just like then they don't have to worry about sales. Like the check is cut and they're set and they can do their next thing.
Just focus on creating.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like so important for sustaining indie development. And it gives like me as a player access to all of these games that maybe I would have picked up piecemeal, but it would have been a lot harder to make that commitment on an unknown property.
Or it'd be like years later that like I find so many cool indie titles. It's like it came out in 2017, but I'm just hearing about it now because finally enough people have played it for it to be discoverable on any kind of platform. And so like, yeah, I hope that it continues to grow in a sustainable way that continues to be equitable for the developers because I really love that concept. And now I'm starting to consider bringing an Xbox back into my life.
Yeah. And I mean, the Series S, it's like, it does fine with graphics and stuff. It's not going to be the powerhouse that the X is, but like for what I'm using it for, where I'm playing a lot of these indie games, it's just, it's been great. So
I feel like we were talking about the other day how just a few years ago, Microsoft and Xbox had such this reputation of being like the console that was watching you sitting on your couch and preventing you from inviting other people over to watch HBO at the same time. And they were at the forefront of, technology is always on and always watching us. And they got such terrible backlash for that. And so I think, for me, a lasting impression I've had of Microsoft is like, oh, they are the embodiment of, commercial game development that's just out here to make money and stop gamers from accessing content that they're not putting behind a paywall or somehow managing continued revenue over time. And like, I don't know, I really saw them as like these money grubbers. And so it's interesting. This shift.
Well, I mean, I think I credit a lot of that to their current, oh boy, I don't know his title, but he's the guy. He's the one that we all see, which is Phil Spencer, I think. Hold on, I'm going to Google real quick. Yeah, Phil Spencer, Xbox. Is he the president? Head of Xbox is what it says on his Twitter.
It says Executive Vice President of Gaming at Microsoft, so...
There you go.
Xbox is probably,
yeah, it's like in summation, the head of Xbox. He's really done a lot to kind of change that perception of the company. And I don't know, he's like the face of them. He comes out here, he says interesting stuff on a regular basis. He feels very accessible. I don't know. It's still a big corporation. And just this year, they just went out and fucking bought ZeniMax, which is like all of the Bethesda studios. And now all of those games are going to be exclusive on their consoles. Like that was, they've got that Microsoft money behind them. Like these are not necessarily our friends, but I think it's cool that they're doing this. I'm pretty sure they're only doing it to be competitive right now because like they're not doing it out of the good of their hearts, right? This is going to be good for them. It's going to be good for Game Pass. It helps fill out that monthly subscription. But right now it's good for gamers and it's good for these indie devs. And I think it's a cool program. So we haven't done a Little Rex in a long time. I introduced that segment and then like never came back to it because the whole point was like, rawr. We do a little Rex when, we didn't have time to play other games, but I want to just throw it out there. I'll do a little Rex today, and it's actually kind of a big Rex, but it's a little Rex. Xbox Game Pass is, like I said, you can get it for anywhere from $10 to $15 a month, but specifically what I'm talking about today is the $15 a month Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription, which comes with xCloud for Android. And the reason this is a little Rex is because you can play this shit on your fucking Android phone. You do not need a console. You do not need a console.
Like all the games that are in Game Pass?
Not all of the games that are in Game Pass, but a fucking lot of them. So there's like 150-ish that you can play on your Android phone. 50 of those support touch controls. So the other 100, you would have to get an Xbox controller and connect it to your phone. But 50 of those games, you can play 50 games, $15 a month on the xCloud on your Android phone, streaming it to your phone with touch controls. Some of the games they just announced this week, actually, that they're at 50 now. They're continuing to add touch support for as much as they can, but it's really... They're doing like really intentional touch support where they're designing the touch support around the game. So it's not just a blanket touch controls that kind of work for some things and don't work for others. But like just some of the games that you can play on xCloud right now on your phone is like shit like Celeste.
Wow.
Minecraft Dungeons, Dragon Quest 11, Gears 5. You can play Gears 5 on xCloud on your Android phone. Sea of Thieves, Spiritfarer, Tell Me Why. Slay the Spire, which is an awesome card game. I mean, you can go find the list online.
Wow.
But it's a great fucking deal. It's a great way to access games if you don't have the money to invest in a console right now or you just want to try some stuff out. It is only on Android right now. However, the iOS beta is supposed to be launching soon. The whole reason it's not on iPhone yet is because I don't know if anyone knows this, but Apple does not play nice with people who want to like sell things through their own online store.
Thought Microsoft was bad, but
yeah, Apple's been kind of dicks about it, so they had to like work around it by creating something that runs in a browser instead of an application on Apple. That's been like their workaround. So that'll be coming shortly, but it is on Android now. Folks should check it out. I think it's a really cool program. I think it's a great way to get access to a lot of good games in a really like cheap and accessible fashion. So
nice.
That's my little Rex for you.
Boom.
Rawr.
Thank you. Rawr.
All right, let's go ahead and transition over to our guest for you today, which is _Juliancito. Julian is a Twitch streamer and friend of our episode 1 guest ZombaeKillz, who you'll hear him mention in this episode. In his Twitch bio, Julian says he's a queer trans Puerto Rican Jew who is passionate about fighting injustice. He's been a very vocal proponent for a trans tag on Twitch, which we discussed in detail with him in the interview. And he's part of Radically Kind Gamers, which is a collective of radically kind content creators focused on building radically kind communities and quality content creation, which uplifts others and spreads joy through random acts of kindness and charity work. We had a really thoughtful conversation with Julian about representation and allyship, particularly on Twitch, and where some folks get it right and some folks get it wrong. He's a chill, pleasant person, and we really enjoyed our chat with him. We hope you all do too. So without further ado, here is our interview with _Juliancito.
Hello, and welcome to our wonderful guest, the Juliancito, who is a Twitch streamer joining us in the Pixel Therapy Pod virtual studio. Julian, can you tell us a little bit about, well, first, we always like to ask folks who join us on the show what their pronouns are. And then secondly, tell us a bit about what kind of streamer you are and what people can expect on your channel.
Sure. Yeah. So my pronouns are he, him. And I am a variety streamer. So I do a little bit of everything. I've played Animal Crossing, Pokemon, Dead by Daylight, Don't Starve. Stardew Valley is another good one. And I did also do a cooking stream recently, although those are a little bit more rare.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
Okay. So like, cooking streams, is this kind of like a mukbang situation, or is it more about the process of making something together?
Yeah, so I started So we started just the whole everything from the beginning and then kind of went from there. I did take like a couple of bites at the end because I figured, everybody's watched me make this whole thing the whole time. But it was a lot more comfortable to just end stream once it was over and then go and eat on my own.
Yeah, that's your reward.
Yeah.
And Julian, what is your history with video games?
Oh, I've been playing games for as long as I can remember. I probably picked up my first controller when I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, and I was playing on an NES, playing Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt. So,
oh my gosh, yes. So Mask.
Yes.
And as you've gotten older, have your tastes changed at all? Like, how do you relate to gaming now?
I mean, I guess my tastes haven't necessarily changed, but expanded. There's so many more games to play now, so many other options. I do still enjoy playing Mario games. I was into Mario Maker 2 for a while. My levels were terrible. Don't play them, but I enjoyed the game. Yeah, I mean, I've even started playing some horror games, which I never thought that I would do, but somehow you just kind of get into things, especially when streaming, because like your community will want to see something or they'll suggest a game, and and quite frankly, sometimes jump scares do make good content.
Yeah, I've got to say, I've known, I've been aware that Twitch exists for a while, but I never really was a person who watched a ton of streams. I don't know. I guess it's either like I can play the game or I can watch someone else play the game, and I feel like most of the time I end up playing the game for longer than I should. But horror games, like when you mentioned horror games, the demo for the new Resident Evil game just came out. It's going to be like Resident Evil Village, I think, and essentially it's like scary. It's like this for folks who aren't familiar with the series, it's survival horror, and a lot of them, at least the ones I've played, you just wake up in a terrible situation that only gets worse, and all you can do is run and open doors and examine objects. So it's like kind of hard to survive when people are coming at you. It's very scary, but I was watching another content creator, Janet Garcia, her stream of the demo, which I would never be able to get through, but it was riveting to kind of like see it from the perspective of I guess I'm just describing why everyone watches streams, but I get it.
Yeah.
So, Julian, something I really liked about your channel is that you're really open about bringing your lived experience and your identities to you publicize that in your bio as a streamer. How do the identities you hold intersect? What's the relationship between that and what you want to bring to your stream?
Well, ultimately what I'd like to bring to my stream is inclusion, representation. I want to make sure that everybody who comes to my stream knows that they are welcome regardless of where they come from, regardless of their background. And also just to, again, for representation, especially as a trans streamer, and then also being Puerto Rican, being Jewish, there's, I do recognize that there also is a difference between me being a white Puerto Rican and, somebody who is Afro-Latinx. But to still also put that representation out there and, allow people to see hey, maybe that person looks like me or has similar background to me and they're doing this, and you really don't see, as much of that. And I really, so to be fair, I haven't done a ton of research into Jewish streamers, but, just from kind of glancing around, I haven't really seen too many. And again, just representation and inclusion is all really important to me, and having a safe space.
Yeah, 100%. You are someone who regularly collaborates with ZombaeKillz, who is a friend of the podcast and also our very first guest.
I love
Zombie is the founder of Radically Kind Gamers, which is a Twitch team that you are a member of. And I was wondering if you could take a minute to describe, so the organization says that they're organized around bringing radical kindness into gaming. What does that mean to you? Like, what does it mean to bring radical kindness into gaming? What kind of space are y'all trying to create?
Well, we want a space that is exactly what we say, is radically kind. It's doing things for others with no expectations of anything in return. It's being nice to others. It's being friendly. It's charity. It's pretty much everything. Zombie and I, we over, what was it, Christmas Eve, I had mentioned to her, we were streaming Stardew Valley. We had, we were just kind of hanging out, whatever. And I mentioned to her about the Instagram account Trans Santa, which was an account where like all of these trans youth would write in about, what they would like for Christmas and things like that. And like right away, Zombie was like, okay, we're doing this. And we ended up like, I think she gifted to maybe like 20 or 25 trans kids that night. And it was really great. And so that's the community that we want to foster, because we were able to do that because of the community that we have, who was willing to donate to be able to fund a lot of these gifts for these kids. So it was really great. So that's the kind of thing that we like to do.
Nice. And why is it so important to create a space for radical kindness in the gaming community?
I mean, we just see so much hate in the gaming community all of the time, especially against Black people, especially against Black women, especially against queer people. And so to make a space that is just radically kind is somewhat unique, especially when you have all of these people who are out here just, they just wake up in the morning and they choose hate. They choose, and it's like, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to you. I don't know like what your life experience has been, but like, I'm sorry that that's what you choose when you wake up every morning, when instead you could choose kindness.
Right, it's that simple, right? Like, it's a choice. Something that I admire and that you've been advocating for a minute now is the inclusion of a trans tag on Twitch. And for the folks at home, tags, like on any other social media site, they basically help people find interesting things to watch, things that are relevant to them. So there are all sorts of tags on Twitch. Twitch currently has an LGBTQ plus tag, but there are like several reasons why this isn't enough and why this LGBTQ tag itself is also problematic for trans folks. I was wondering if you could share a bit about this issue and why you're advocating for it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to me. Again, part of representation, having like there is a very big difference between somebody who is cisgender and transgender. Different experiences, different life experiences, different experiences within the LGBTQIA plus community, and it's not always a safe space for us because there are a lot of cisgender gay men or cisgender lesbian women who are very transphobic and who we are not welcome in their spaces. And so if I'm looking under the LGBTQIA tag, I may find another queer streamer, but are they going to be accepting of me? Are they going to be open to me as a trans person? I don't know. I usually have to do a little bit more digging, whether that's looking into their panels or, potentially even looking on Twitter to see what they've said on Twitter. And so having the separate trans tag allows us to find each other, allows us to have that community. And I mean, along with the trans tag, I really do think that there should be a variety of tags. I'm also an advocate for the disabled tag and for for all identity-based tags, because I don't see why we shouldn't have them, right? Like, if this is another way for people to find each other, especially marginalized people. So whether you're talking about Black people or Pacific Islanders or whomever, right? We all want to find people who we might not be exactly the same. Certainly we're not. Nobody is, right? But there's at least that thread of commonality that really helps to build community.
Definitely. And we're not a monolith, like to what you just said about like, why not have more specific tags within that umbrella? Like, it's not like every letter within LGBTQIA and plus could all have their own tag, because the experience of each of those letters is in no way like related to one. Like, we share community, of course, but it's like to act as though, oh, the LGBTQ community, they've all been handled. It's like just shows the misunderstanding of why we even needed the tag in the first place. Like, and I've also seen conversation about like, oh, like as an ally, like I use the tag so that people know that I'm inclusive. And it's like, well, then that's another reason why we need our own fucking tag. Like,
yep.
It's not for you.
Yes.
And like you just said, it's also a place where creators who are queer or trans or other parts of the LGBTQ spectrum are probably using the tag to find each other, not like allies who are trying to gain social points because they are claiming that they are part of the LGBTQ umbrella.
Yes, which is actually another thing that I talk about on Twitter as well, because I do not believe like that. The A does not stand for ally. The A is for asexual or for the A is for it's not for ally, right? And so
ace, arrow,
exactly. It does not stand for ally. And even though if you technically look up the tag on Twitch, right, like it says and for use by allies, let's be real, how many things has Twitch gotten wrong over the last year alone, right? So like, are we really going to think about it and kind of put it out there like that? Also, allies, people who say that they are allies but are using the LGBTQIA tag are taking up space from queer content creators. And a true ally knows that you should not do those things. And so if you are an ally, if this is something, if you want queer people to know that your space is safe for us to come into, make sure that your rules are very clear about no homophobia, no transphobia. Put it in your panels, right? Like, I can pretty much guarantee that anybody who is going to go to a streamer's space, especially as a marginalized person, is going to look at your rules, is going to look at your panels, is going to be looking for that information. And if they can't find it, they're going to move on.
Have you gotten any sort of pushback or response from Twitch so far? Like, I know that they haven't implemented this, but like, have they acknowledged that this is a thing people are asking for?
So they've acknowledged it on their their community forums, which the trans tag has like the most votes of anything ever on Twitch. But they've pretty much said, yep, we know this is a thing. Thanks for bringing it up again.
Stay mad about it.
Right, exactly. Even, when we finally were going to have that town hall talk, we were all like, oh, okay, finally we'll have like some time to talk about this. Except that they kind of steamrolled over it in like 5-10 minutes. And we're like, yeah, we know that this is a thing, and trust us, we know better. And we know what's going to, we don't want you to face any harassment. And so we're just going to, not give you the trans tag because of potential harassment, which, can we talk about the amount of harassment that's already rampant on Twitch?
Yeah.
Like, that they're not doing anything about? And marginalized people on Twitch already have these defenses in plan. There's a button on my Stream Deck that specifically is if I get hate rated, it clears out the entire chat. It puts a marker on my channel so I can go back to that later if needed. It turns off all of my alerts so that anybody with, questionable names will not show up if they follow me. So like there's all of these things already in place. Plus we all have mods who are ready to drop the ban hammer at a moment's notice. And so it just seems like such a strange response, like, oh, well, we don't want you to be harassed. Well, we're already being harassed. You're already not doing anything about it. So why don't you just let us handle it and be able to find each other?
Right. And also it's your platform. So like the idea that it's like, oh, our hands are tied. Like you might get harassed. Like we can't, oh no, what do we do? It's like, first of all, I work in software design, and what you're saying about like the tools you're using for your own stream, like if anything, having a trans tag, knowing that might be even especially vulnerable to hate, that makes it even easier for you to know where to design and put in your hate stoppers. Like that doesn't make any fucking sense to me. Nope. I'm sorry. And I am enjoying the fact that on the LGBTQIA plus tag, they literally say the A is for allies, because I assure you that whoever put that piece of UI in there was probably not a queer person.
Nope. Certainly was not. Yeah. So it's definitely frustrating because it seems like literally every other week I'm seeing on Twitter, oh, we got to talk about allies not using the LGBTQIA tag again. It's like, can you just not?
Oh, allies. Like it's frustrating when I feel like the people who use the label ally to describe themselves are also the types of people to be the most defensive of their allyship, and kind of like the people that you end up having to do the most hand holding for. Like, as you said earlier, the point of an ally is not to create more work for the people you're claiming to be down for or there to protect. So like, just stay in your lane, y'all. And if you want to help, like, fucking watch and subscribe and uplift and promote queer people's streams, queer people of color's streams. Like, hello. What kind of, I should have asked this earlier, but like, if you're comfortable sharing, like, what kind of shit do cis people try to pull, like, when you encounter like being unsafe as a trans person in cis gay and lesbian channels? Like, what kind of shit happens?
I mean, luckily I have not had to encounter any of that directly, partly because I do kind of pre-screen where I'm going and where I'm going to be hanging out. But I do know, just for anecdotally mostly, that it is sometimes, not always, a safe space. Claims that, well, oh, you're not really a man, or you're not really a woman. Oddly enough, very like heteronormative type of projections on people. So, but again, luckily I have not really had to deal with any of that myself, because I try not to put myself in those situations. So
yeah, that resonates. Like, it reminds me of this whole conversation about the LGBTQIA plus tag. It reminds me of when I was looking for a therapist the most recent time, and on psychologytoday.com, which is like, they have this filter where you can like look up therapists in your area. They have an LGBTQ tag, but similarly to what happens in Twitch, like, I was experiencing a similar thing in real life where I would make appointments to talk to these therapists who said on their profiles that they were LGBT plus. And then what would happen is I would be 2, 3, 4 sessions in, and I'd be hit with something like, oh, like, do you think that maybe society would take you more seriously as a trans man if you tried binding more often? Or like, did you think that maybe like you'd have less gender dysphoria if you stopped painting your nails and tried to act more like a man? And it's like, hold up. Like, not only have you lulled me into a false sense of security by claiming that you are LGBTQ+, you are literally using the fact that we have this shared connection to, like, get close enough to me to unleash your bigoted shit on me as if you're helping me. Like, it was always said with the most utmost concern, like, oh no, like, I'm one of you. Like, I get you. Like, I'm a gay man, and I get that you're just a woman pretending to be a man, and I'm trying to help you. I had to, like, and that's the kind of bullshit that we have to deal with all the time when we're trying to navigate these spaces where they claim that they're representing all of us when they're really just representing the, like, you know, this not even majority, just whoever's the loudest and gets the most visibility, I guess. Like, it's...
Yeah, I mean, whoever is the closest to the quote unquote societal norm, right? I mean, we talk mostly about cis, gay, white men because they are the closest to cis white men who have the power, right? And if they are able to, how do I say this in a way? So if they're able to kind of present their sexuality in a way that is accepted by the straights, right? By the you know, the majority in society, then they are that much closer to the quote unquote norm, right? Whereas you're getting you know, and I mean, we've seen it all throughout queer history, right? Like cis gay men did not want to associate with lesbian women, did not want to associate with gay people of color. Like, it's that proximity to the I think I'm going to say this right. It's the proximity to the hegemony, yes, that that people often try to strive for and don't give any consideration to the fact that we are actually stronger together.
Yeah. Right. And that, like, our differences aren't a threat to you. Like,
right.
I think sometimes hashtag not all cis gay men, just kidding, but like, I just know that I know you just, it's okay, y'all. It's okay to feel a little uncomfy sometimes. Sorry, we still love you, but like, it's just like, I find that sometimes, especially when I'm trying to have conversations, like intergenerational conversations with like older cis white gay men who are in my life, like, there's sometimes this defensiveness of like, I had a horrible childhood. I was afraid to be who I am. And now when you act like that, when you don't conform to a gender ideal, when you act like a faggy, like a gender, like when you're throwing these rules out the window, it makes me feel bad because I had to fight just to be taken seriously as a man. And it's like, I'm so sorry that you feel like you have to replicate the violence that they've done to you in order to keep me and us safe. Like, that's wrong. Don't you see that that's hurting all of us? Like, and it's not your fault. Like, how else can you survive unless you take on, like, if you don't have community, if you don't have support, like, I can see how taking on the traits of the oppressor was the only way that you see of liberating yourself. But you have to be able to pause for a minute and understand that, like, you continuing that cycle is not gonna liberate any of us, and it's just gonna cause more pain. So, I don't know, that's a lot. So, on this podcast, we typically ask folks to share a specific game that had some sort of impact on their life. We really are all about the emotional connections, the impact that games can have on us. And you mentioned, I mean, it's no secret to anyone of your fans or your followers that you are a lifelong Pokemon fan. So maybe let's ask, what was the first Pokemon game that you played? Like, what was the one that made you fall in love with Pokemon?
I think what really made me fall in love with Pokemon was the card game. And then of course I played Red and Blue and, and all of that. But definitely I think the card game is where I really got my start.
That was where like my street cred started, just with my binder that I would carry around everywhere.
Yep.
I also loved like when Pokemon the movie 2000 came out, and I think other Pokemon movie releases, there would be like special holographic cards that would only be coming out with the movie.
I still have my Ancient Mew card. I have several of them actually.
Yes. Oh my god. If you have an Ancient Mew card, you're trans. That's the rules.
I love
that. So what, like, okay, so you fell in love with the card game. Like what is it about Pokemon? Like what is it about Pokemon that is so spellbinding?
Well, for me, it was a couple of things. As far as the card game goes, it was the first time, when I was playing it and in the area that I was in, the card game was predominantly a lot of boys that were playing it. And so for me, that was really special because I got to feel like one of the boys for the first time and didn't really get a lot of pushback from it. If I had tried to play football with them, well, no, you can't do that. Or if I tried to do, anything more physical, right? Like, oh, no, you can't do that. But Pokemon was kind of my way to make that connection and be one of the boys for the first time. And so that's part of the reason why it's so special to me. And then the other is also just the anime and how much it focused on friendship and kindness and supporting one another and being there for each other. And, even if things got tough, you kept going, and that was it.
It's empowering for children to be reminded that like they have autonomy and strength too. Like, I don't know, it's like as a kid, you spend a lot of time, you can't wait to be an adult. And I think, and when you see a lot of video game protagonists, like they are adults and they're strong and capable and they know all the answers and they have had years of experience and they're, forged by fire. And I don't know, it's just nice to be reminded that all types of people have the capacity to go on a heroic journey.
It's true.
As an adult, like, how has your relationship with Pokemon shifted? Are you still playing Pokemon games? Are you still watching the anime?
Oh yeah. I still play. I've played, Sword and Shield was, of course, is the most recent one. And I am very, very excited for the Pokemon Snap 2. I was screaming. I was so ready for that. It's funny because I had been talking about that for a while. Like, oh man, I really wish they would remake Pokemon Snap. And literally the night before they had finally announced that they were going to make it, I had been talking about it with my girlfriend. So when I woke up the next morning, I was like, what just happened?
They heard me
this is actually real. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was I forgot about, that's a deep cut. Like that was like N64, I want to say.
Yeah.
Such a surreal and enjoyable and unique game. I'm really excited. But for folks who may not be familiar, Pokemon Snap, you're basically like this anthropologist person, and I think you're on an island and you're trying to learn about the Pokemon who populate the island, and you basically ride around in this car, and it's I've even seen it been described as like a first person shooter, but that's like not what it is. I mean, technically you are looking through the lens of a camera and shooting pictures of Pokemon. But it was a really unique game in that, like, I feel like for its time, like you could capture all sorts of different pictures depending on what moment you press the shutter button. So you could get a really funny pose from a Pokemon. You could get like them from behind, or it's like a really rare Pokemon and it's just a blur in the frame. And so it really captured that excitement of like wildlife photography. Like it really felt like you were really immersing in the kind of world of what it's like to encounter a wild Pokemon, which the RPGs don't really capture in the same way. Like you're just in the tall grass, the screen starts flashing, and then you're confronted with a Pokemon. But this really makes them feel like creatures.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really hoping that they will also have some sort of integration with the VR Labo Kit.
Oh my God.
Because you can, there's the one kit where you can make the camera. And so if there was the integration where I could like just take my little Labo Kit and, like do all the pictures, and oh man, that would be so cool.
Okay, so I am not familiar with this Labo Kit. Like, can you describe it a bit more?
Yeah, so there are several different like kits, and so depending on which one you get it's literally all just cardboard pieces, and then you pop them out and you stick them all together and you build things that then you can use with the Switch. And so the VR one, there is like you can build the camera, you can build there's like an elephant mask thing. I forget exactly what the whole purpose of that one is, but like there's like all these different things that you can build with it that are then integrated in. And so with the camera one, you literally take the Switch out of the dock, you put it into the eyepiece or whatever you want to call it, and then you hold it like an actual camera, and you can like kind of look around and take pictures, and you're in that world. So that would be so cool. I would love that integration with Pokemon Snap.
Like you never need to leave.
Yeah.
This is really cool. I just looked this up. Folks can check it out at labo.nintendo.com. It's like labo.nintendo.com. And as Julian was describing, it's like these kits, these thick paper cardboard based kits, kind of like a model airplane or something. Like you break the pieces out of a preformed piece of square of cardboard, then you can build these objects, and they're like I don't know if all of them are VR related, but
just the one.
Yeah, it's like different controllers, or it's like ways of bringing, like there's one that you can use with racing games that's like a steering wheel and a pedal. So it's like bringing the Switch into a physical space and really involving kids in the engineering of or adults of I think that's really cool. It kind of breaks out of the of sort of tying a game necessarily to just a screen.
Yeah. There's one you can build where like you're a robot.
Yeah, that's so
super cool.
Sony, hello. Can you start making something like this? Yes, I'll hold. I need this.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. Like, I know there was a lot of like, oh, this is just for kids. Like, oh, I don't want cardboard or whatever. But like, when you actually have it and you're building everything, and like, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And something I really enjoy about Nintendo, I think this has been true for a while, and I see this with like the Ring Fit as well, but they're always trying to kind of play with what can a Nintendo console be, or like how should people interact with a video game. I think it can, for all of Nintendo's faults, like I do think that it is really exciting to have a company that's always taking that risk of like just trying something that might not work with the consumer, but being like, this could really bring joy to people's lives, or really make gaming like a family thing. Yeah, it's cool, and I wish more companies would kind of think about it like that. Yeah. So, Juliana, it's been lovely hanging out with you. Where can folks follow you online? Let's start there. Where can folks keep up with you online?
On Twitch, Twitter, pretty much everywhere. It's _Juliancito. Twitch, Twitter, TikTok.
What's your TikTok vibe? Like, what kind of videos do you like to make?
So I've just started on TikTok, and I only have 2 videos on there. One is talking about how it's not safe for trans people to go into, cisgender, lesbian, and gay streams. And the other, I actually just uploaded a trans tag sea shanty.
Oh my God, yes. Everyone watch it. It's so good. Julian has the voice of an angel.
Oh, thank you. And I got really lucky. I was struggling with the harmony on that. So my friend Lugi Tanuki came in and did all the harmonies and like mixed the track for me. So I was very thankful that, he was able to help me with that.
Julian, thank you so much for joining us on Pixel Therapy. It has been absolutely wonderful hanging out with you.
Thank you for having me.
Time is up for today's session of Pixel Therapy. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope that listening to our thoughts and feelings gave you some thoughts and feelings of your own. If you want more Pixel Therapy, come check us out at patreon.com/pixeltherapypod, where you can snag that monthly bonus episode for just $2 a month, plus opportunities to get involved with the community and influence the show directly. If you're not up for contributing monetarily, but you enjoyed this episode, there are lots of ways you can support us for free, in particular by reviewing us on podchaser.com as part of their Review for Good month and following us on Instagram and other social media at Pixel Therapy Pod. That stuff is just as important, and we appreciate it just as much. Remember that Pixel Therapy is a happy member of the But Why Though Podcast Network, so you can support us by supporting them and heading over to butwhythoughpodcast.com. That's though with a THO. Take a peek at the inclusive geek community they're building around pop culture news, reviews, and kick-ass podcasts like yours truly. And you can keep up with all this stuff and more by visiting our website at pixeltherapypod.com.
Finally, since we like to put our money and our energy where our mouth is, we end every episode with a recommended side quest. Thank you so much to Julian for the recommendation for this week. And this week, the side quest is the Deaf Queer Resource Center, also known as the DQRC. It is a national nonprofit that works to support, inform, empower, and bring more visibility to and awareness about marginalized deaf LGBTQ communities through events, fundraisers, and advocacy. They are currently going over a super cool redesign of their website, which can be found at deafqueer.org. But you can also find them on Facebook and Twitter at deafqueer.
Awesome. Thank you for that side quest, Spencer and Julian. That is our show for today. So go forth, run a story mission, level up some stats, and don't forget to hug an NPC every now and then. We'll be back soon with some more Pixel Therapy. Oh, we nailed it.